This is the word of God. Thanks be to God. The liturgical year has rolled around again to this Sunday before the beginning of Lent, when traditionally we explore this wonderful story about Jesus and the three disciples' experience on the mountaintop, commonly called the Transfiguration. We know the story pretty well. Jesus takes Peter and John and James to a mountain to pray, and just even then we're already tuned into the fact that something unusual is about to happen. Mountaintops are where very important stuff happens in the Bible. Consider the great stories of Moses and Elijah. And what happens astounds both the disciples and us, because Jesus' clothes become dazzling white and his face shines, and the glory of God became evident in him, making known Jesus' divine nature. Yet the disciples, once again, almost missed the point. They were sleepy, you see. Only when Jesus was joined by Elijah and Moses in great splendor, and they were talking with him, did the disciples finally wake up to the fact of what was happening, which was when Peter offered to build these little booths for them to rest and stay on the mountain. I have always loved the almost comical nature of this next piece of the story. Just as Peter says, "Let me build these places for us to stay," a cloud overtakes them all, and a quick rebuke comes from God saying, "This is my son, my beloved, listen to him." As commentator Laurie Brandt Hale remarks, all that is missing is the cosmic hand reaching down to give Peter a good "you're missing the point" slap upside the head. I don't know if the disciples understood the importance of what has happened on that mountaintop. But if they did, we're told they didn't tell anyone about it. But what happens next seems to me to really complete the story. The day following Jesus' transfiguration, a man with a son possessed by a demon called to him from the crowd, imploring him to help. When Jesus realized that the disciples had been unable to help the man, a cranky Jesus rebukes the demon, heals the boy, and gives him back to his father. Notice, the dazzling spiritual mountaintop experience has not shielded either Jesus nor the disciples from the everyday mundane work of the ministry. Instead, those mountaintop experiences have prepared them for the work of God in the world, and they confront profound human need. We contemporary Christians don't talk much about demonic possession. If we do, it's usually in terms of something like that sensational demon-possessed girl in The Exorcist. Her head spins around and green goo comes out of her mouth, and the room gets really cold, and the priests are sort of helpless. Such sensational Hollywood demonic possession. We're steeped in the scientific method, so we tend to relegate the genre of biblical literature that has Jesus casting out demons to the ash heap of a pre-scientific worldview. But if we do that, we miss the point of this text. Whether or not we actually believe in demonic possession, we must acknowledge our responsibility with Jesus to facing off the forces of evil in this world. I'm amused by the images we use when we talk about evil. Here's Snidely Whiplash. Remember him? He was always trying to do something bad to sweet Nell. And when he was thwarted from his evil ways, usually by the handsome Canadian Mountie Dudley Do-Right, he'd say, "Curses, foiled again." Or how about this guy, Boris Badenov? The evil Russian spy from the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. He and his wife, Natasha Fatale, would cook up monstrous plots, foiled by the end of the episode, either by their own ineptitude or by the clueless Rocky or Bullwinkle. Or what about this guy? The personification of a really, really bad guy. He's blown up planets, he's cut off his son's hand, He's in general made the universe a hard place for nice folks to live. Or this one. Friends, I don't think evil looks like this. If it did look like Snidely or Boris or Darth Vader or even this guy, we would be scared to death and we would stay away. We would know immediately that these were not forces we wanted to get involved with. But that's the thing. If the devil or evil confronted us with a red face and horns, we would easily recognize it. But evil is seldom that. Evil is a seductive master or mistress. Evil masquerades as our friend, our ally, our partner, in what we might consider sometimes to be the right way to go. I don't think evil is so obvious. I think evil often comes to us in ways we don't recognize, and sometimes evil confronts us in ways that are very tempting and very easy to go along with. Yet clearly our text this morning shows the integral connection between Jesus' call on our lives and engaging the difficult battle of encountering evil in the world. As Jesus confronts the evil of his day, where do we find demons in our day? How do we recognize evil? Well, many would argue with me. I like to think of evil as the things human beings do to each other that cause pain and suffering and death. Not that pain and suffering and death in and of themselves are evil, but insofar as we have a hand in causing those things, they are evil. I was tempted, maybe by the devil, to go into a long academic theological treatise here on the definition of evil as both a natural phenomenon and the dark side of creation, and as a moral phenomenon, as in the ways humans are tempted to rebel against God and mess up what we were created to do. I could go on forever about that. But I thought better of it because I doubt many of us are moved by long academic theological discussions, and I'm not sure I could even keep myself interested in such a thing. Instead, let's look at what we do know in our hearts to be evil. As we look at the slew of social problems we have in this country and around the world, we might pause and ask ourselves how it is that in the richest country in the world we have children who are food insecure. That is, children who have no idea where their next meal is coming from. We might ask why we have over 10 million non-elderly citizens who have no health insurance. We might ask how it is that we have the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. We might ask how it is that we are deporting refugees to countries where their return guarantees their murder. We might ask how it is that there are people living down by the river in Ames, Iowa, and under bridges in Des Moines, even in the middle of the winter. We might ask why the stated clerk of the Presbyterian Church USA, the highest ecclesiastical officer of our church, was pulled over by police in Storm Lake last summer, not once, but twice, for no apparent reason while he was in town there, attending synod school. Oh, and do I need to mention that he happens to be African American? Driving while black? Do you think Jesus is calling us here? We could continue to make a list of issues that would take us all day long to enumerate, but I think you get the point. We are a people who encounter evil every day. And often we shrug it off, or we refuse to see it, or we don't believe that it's evil. Elie Wiesel, the Holocaust survivor and Nobel Prize-winning author of Night, concluded in a series of explorations of the actors in that genocide that all of those who participated in the Holocaust, those most culpable, those most despicable, those upon whom guilt should be heaped, were those who looked on and seeing what was happening, did nothing. The most egregious offenders, those who did nothing in the face of obvious evil. Up on the mountain, remember, God chided Peter and John and James to listen to Jesus. Listen to him. And God chides us today. Listen to him. Friends, there is an integral connection between following Christ and confronting evil. Whether it is defying the demons of poverty and racism, or opposing the evil spirits of narcissism and individualism, we follow Jesus when we challenge the power of evil in this world. And this is not easy work. And it is not always popular work. This summer at our church's General Assembly in St. Louis, the offering taken at our opening worship service will be directed to an agency in St. Louis that helps bail out folks from jail, folks who have been arrested for petty crimes and cannot get out because they cannot raise the fairly insignificant bail of $200. These are people who are kept in jail for months at a time, simply because they cannot raise $200. As I look out among us, I know that most of us would be able to raise that money. These people are in jail not because they are drug lords or murderers or terrorists. Most of them are arrested for things like littering. Once in jail, they cannot go to work, so they lose their job. And what happens to their families? And then, when they have their day in court and they do get out, they are presented with a bill for their time in jail. And did I mention that most of them are not white European Americans? This small action by our General Assembly will help just a little bit in making their world a better place, and it will help just a little bit in announcing that Presbyterians are in St. Louis for good. But frankly, it is probably not enough. We need to examine the structures and systems that perpetuate such evil, and we need to dismantle them. When Jesus, Peter, James, and John left that mountaintop, enriched by the glory of God, they went back to the messy details of everyday life. Just as we come here to worship God every week, we also leave this sanctuary empowered to deal with the messy details of our own lives. And as we do that, we rely on God's Spirit to surround us as we offer our gifts to others, naming and confronting evil wherever we find it. Like Peter, we may need a good slap on the side of the head. Snap out of it. We are assured that evil will never triumph, and yet we are confronted with the challenge that evil yet exists and tempts us here today. Where are our devils? Where do you see the demons? How do you see the forces of evil working around us? And how will you and me challenge that evil? The good news, and there is good news, is that evil never wins, not finally. And the good news, and it is good news, is that God travels with us in that work. We are not left on our own, but we also, disciples, travel together, casting out demons wherever we find them. Think on these things.